for pretty much my entire life. And um, I'm currently up in Occidental in Northern California and staying here in this Airstream. My internet goes in and out. I might go outside, but I'm here for the moment. Everything's in the moment anyway. So here we are. And I'm working as a sustainability initiatives manager for the food program at Google, and have been focusing in on some areas to support biodiversity in our food system and solutions around that, and as well as a number of other issues from plastic reduction to seafood to food waste and plant forward diets and that. So, and I have nutrition and also global environmental health. And so I'm going to stop there. Josiah invited me to join, Josiah Reeson Kane. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Good to see you all.
Thank you so much, Christa. Sorry, I was on mute there. It's great to see you here. Yeah, thank you. I think you've been to Savannah House at least once, right? You've been a few times, I think.
I've been to Savannah House. Yeah, it's an amazing, beautiful home and community, and the program you're offering. I'm super impressed and amazed by, and look forward to trying to connect with you all more. So, yeah.
Well, let's go to Tim, and then I'll do a little bit of an intro to what's been happening and a recap. But Tim, welcome.
Yeah, right on. Thank you very much. It's cool to see a couple of familiar faces here, and happy to be a part of the conversation and get caught up on what you've been doing. My name is Tim West. I work at the intersection of food technology, social good, and innovation. Background is as a chef with an interest in large-scale sustainable and regenerative food systems. I work in a sort of connecting capacity. Predominantly my work at this point is a lot of science and technology scouting, in large part with the Mars Advanced Research Institute. But I wear a few hats in life. One of them is as global ambassador and trustee of the Future Food Institute. So we're a much more community-driven ecosystem of global change makers and entrepreneurs and in between corporates and startups. And just like Christa, I really just care about whole systems change and transformation and evolution, and work in that capacity. So very much grateful to be a part of this conversation and see what pieces I have to add to the puzzle.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm going to just quickly recap before we move on, just on the next yin question. So just to get you up to speed and a kind of reminder for everyone else, what we've been doing is we launched the Up Game on Earth Day, and this is round 2 of the Up Game. We're going to take 26 topics a year. Every 2 weeks we pick a new topic, and the idea of these topics is they're kind of like pillars of our society. We started with sound, we moved to food, in week after next is community, and then we're going to go through piece by piece and bring together community leaders, essentially people in the trenches such as yourselves, that are at the forefront of food for systems change, community for systems change, sound for systems change. And the idea is to apply our collective intelligence. On week 1 is focused on seed. And this is where the game comes in. It's all about synthesizing the 8 community solutions that are fundable to take us to the next step, which then we have a week off, and then we come back for sprout stage. And that's the sprout level, and that's what we're doing with sound right now. And that's where we start to break into guilds and form a food alliance. And the whole idea is this is about connecting dots with different communities. And so Sprout, what happens is the alliance starts to focus on what's its purpose going to be in connecting other communities and serving the ecosystem. And guilds focus on particular directions. Think of them as like verticals. And so in the case of sound, we have the Sound Technology Guild, which is launching a new company called Sound Helix, which is a new form of like self-playing crystal bowls. And then we've got another guild called Sound Portals, which are designing physical spaces that are going to be, starting with San Francisco, created across the city to create like a scavenger hunt game where people can come into these sound immersions. So we're already seeing these projects emerge. And so the idea here is for us to, by this week, synthesize what are the things we know about that we want to shine a light on, that we want to raise funding for, so that can go through to the next gate, which is where we start to invite other people in food systems to play roles on these guilds and alliance, and it kind of goes forward like that. And every 2 weeks we're running new experiments with new people. So hopefully that's a good like just framing for where we're at, and I'll share more on that. But let's see, we don't have Paola, not yet. So next, just going back, given we all went around yesterday and did this, Christa, this question of if there's one moment in your life that you can point to, any point in your life that was a kind of a crucible moment around your relationship with food. Would love to hear that. And we talked about, mine was when I was 7 years old. I grew up growing food my whole life. But when I was 7 years old, I got fed my favorite pig, and it changed my relationship. It was really kind of sad and quite traumatic, actually, but definitely changed my relationship with food. Piggy. Yeah. So starting there, and just a word on this, one of the things we're doing here is we're big believers that the world is out of harmony. And so we're human doings more than beings. And so what we do is focus half of the game being on like deeply connecting as a community ourselves. So the idea is, can we synchronize heartbeats, breaths? And we're doing all sorts of things around this. And so this is the yin stage. And then we go to the yang stage, which is all about collective action and applying collective intelligence. So hopefully that's this very short intro to what's going on, but hopefully it's helpful. But over to you, Christa.
Well, if I had to think about like the first pivotal moments where food became really present to me in a way of thinking about it, and my joy around food was, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and our family used to go to Southwest Michigan in the summer a lot of times, and go strawberry picking, blueberry picking, cherry picking. And for those that don't know, Michigan's actually the second largest producer of specialty crops in the country, next to California. So meaning like fruits and vegetable kind of crops. So there's a lot of places to do that. And it was just it's what I look forward to all summer long and what I wanted to do. So that was pretty pivotal. But I also want to mention then, as I got older, and after I graduated with a degree in nutrition, I worked in the south side of Chicago for WIC, for food supplement program, Women, Infant, and Children, and I was a nutritionist. And I was telling they should be more fruit. The clinic where I was at, there was like literally no place to get fruits and vegetables, middle of the winter in Chicago. And that propelled me into a whole nother line of work, which was access, and thinking about access to healthy food, especially for low-income communities, and where and how are we going to get fresh food to everybody. So that was a very pivotal time for me as well.
Well, that's some of the topics that have been synthesized here are right on that for you. Tim, do you want to shoot next?
Yeah, awesome question. I actually have two very specific moments. The first, when I was 16 years old, I was working at this Flying Pig Cafe. It was a cafe actually birthed out of the Cabbage Hole Farm, sustainable farm, practicing aquaponics and specializing in rare and endangered breeds of animals. And every Wednesday there'd be a farmer's market. And after the farmer's market one day, all of the chefs and farmers and myself, I was a stock boy, sat down to have a meal. And it was one of those aha, holy fuck food epiphanies of this is where food comes from. It comes from these cool people. And I remember the chef dancing around with the prep cook, mopping floors and to Highway to Hell from AC/DC. And I was like, fuck, these people are cool. And I want to be like them. And it was just, I felt at home around them. But that was my twin brother's passion, cooking. He went to culinary school and I went off to CU Boulder, where I had my second food epiphany after getting food poisoning from Taco Bell. And after 3 days of thinking I was going to die, I finally called my brother, who was at culinary school, and I said, dude, I need to learn to cook. And I need to, I've got some chicken. How do I cook it? And long story short, I cooked some chicken. I sat down to eat it. And as I did, there was a knock on the door, and it was all my stoned friends from down the hall. They're like, hey man, what are you doing in there? You want to share? It smells good. And that's when I realized that, food really brings people together. It'll make me more friends. It'll make me healthier, and it'll enable me to travel. And that was when I decided to dedicate my food to learning about a food system and figuring out how to revitalize it and make it better.
Beautiful intro, brother. Thank you for that. And it's, yeah, I've seen the way you bring people together around food, and it's
just wait till you get a chance to come visit me up here in the Pacific Northwest. I just moved up here the last 6 weeks ago, and there's a lot of good food people up here. So yeah. If and when anybody can travel again, we've got guest rooms. Come visit. We're in Bellingham, Washington, and I promise to feed you good stuff.
You're right by Khan is part of this, by the way, Tim. He just can't be here today.
Is he the one in Vancouver?
Yeah. Did you guys connect?
I wanted to. He was on the first call, I think, that you did, and I heard his story, but we never got a chance to connect. I'm very curious.
Let me connect you after this. So I'll
looking forward to it.
Because I think you can basically see each other's property.
Yeah, I can see Vancouver.
So, so just bring us to the end. We've got 9 more minutes here before we move over to getting down to work. One thing we did with sound was we invited people to share any practices they have. Does anyone want to put an offering? Otherwise, we'll lead a short meditation. Does anyone? So are you talking
about practices with food?
So it could totally be a practice with food, but what we did with sound was people would do different sound offerings. So it would be people that were participating in it would kind of share their share an offering. So feel free if there's an offering around food that would engage people. And
I guess I have an invitation, maybe.
Awesome.
It's something I'll do typically when I'm trying to just get people to really think about what they're eating. And it helps if you have these 3 ingredients, but you can do it at any time. Sometimes I'll start with a spoonful of brown rice and I'll give it to everybody. I invite them to chew it 100 times. And as you chew it, the rice gets sweeter and sweeter and turns into this delicious paste, and then you eat it. And then I'll give them a little raisin, maybe still on the vine, and ask them to chew it, and it gets sweeter and sweeter. And then I'll give them a Dorito and ask them to chew it 100 times. And Doritos aren't meant to be enjoyed long term because there's not a lot of nutritional value, and very few people get past 30 chews before it tastes like cardboard. So the invitation is, as we actually put food in our mouth, to spend that time and chew it 100 times and see how our body truly reacts to it.
Boom, beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah, we will absolutely do that. And in fact, we could bring that into one of our dinner portals and do it.
Cool.
We've got a dinner portal on community impact tomorrow night. So that we'll think where we can bring it in, but we'll create a ritual around it. Now, one of the channels that have come out of the game this week is food reverence. So looking specifically at like rituals, like rites of passages that we can create to re-enchant people with their food. And so things like that could be ideas that we actually bring in as like, you know, we might be able to create a game or something like that, a card game where people could connect back with their food. So does anyone else have a similar offering or a similar invitation or a strategy you share at dinner parties or any offering around food that will like connect us all?
I have one. Something I started doing at work. I did a meditation teacher training a couple of years ago and wanted to integrate some of my meditation work with the food work. So I started looking at and working with a team at Google that does mindful meals and started leading mindful meals outside in the garden and it's kind of before you start the meal, a meditation on really connecting with how the food was grown, who touched it, that it's part of the water system, the sun, the plants, our connection to the earth. And by eating this food, it becomes us. The earth becomes us, and we're really one with it. So it's a meditation that you do before the meal, and then you actually do a little bit of silent time eating. I don't know if that would work within your community idea, but that's the idea of that mindful meal sort of meditation. But even just the meditation before the meal, kind of dropping into really connecting with how it was grown and who touched it. It's a very Thich Nhat Hanh kind of meditation, but it's pretty lovely.
Can I add a thought to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I love it. It's really nice and grounding and helps me connect with nature and that we're all part of it. But the whole science of the brain gut connection, it'd be really cool to kind of invite people to think about and observe how maybe what they've eaten affects their mind, their thoughts, their modes and so forth.
Yeah.
I haven't fully bridged that gap.
It taps that into it too. It's kind of like, feel what's going through your body. Did you have some caffeine? Can you feel that buzzing? Are you feeling, low blood sugar? So doing that, going through your physical state as well, and be thinking about how this food will nourish you and give you energy for your day, and definitely tap into it. And there's the part about, and there's a suggestion to chew slowly and take, I think we did like 30 chews before you swallow during your silent part too. So that's a really powerful act. So yeah, could be combining. I love it. We could combine a lot within that.
Krista, this is like perfect example where my mind is going is 8 weeks from now we're going to be at the food harvest, and one potential like project of the Unified Planet Food Alliance could be like a card deck called Mindful Meals that would bring people on a rite of passage as they go through dinner, around like connecting with their food, with how they're feeling, getting them asking questions. And it could take people through something like that, where we could, this concept of mindful meals could become a sort of rite of passage for people that we would kind of try and accelerate. So thank you for sharing that. And there's a big there.
Yeah, beautiful, great, yeah, awesome.
case in point to kind of what we're doing here. Just trying to connect dots. So Nicky and Paola, thank you so much from calling in from Brazil and Colombia. Nicky, I think Nicky and Paola are going to share a video with us around the social gastronomy movement, which I've been part of since its very inception, and it's one of my favorite ways of like learning about the whole food system. And so I'm just delighted to have these dear friends with us. Thank you, Nicky.
Hi all, I have good news that we made it. Bad news that I'm not ready with a video yet. So until Friday, until the end of the week, I will share the
Okay, no worries. Well, why didn't you, Nicky? Do you want to share? We were just sharing things that touch us, or like offerings around how we relate to food, such as mindful meals. You know, would love you to share what was the kind of most inspiring ritual that you've seen around the social gastromotiva and all the work you've done with the unhoused in Brazil?
So I think, and you've been part of it, and that was the video originally that I'll share as well, because we'll be told from a different perspective. But it's the celebration moment of food. And for those, because I think quite a few people that I didn't meet yet, so hi everyone. We in Refectorio Gastromotiva, one of our projects, it's a restaurant community school that was co-founded with Chef Massimo Bottura. And what we do, we collect food surplus that wasn't valued, but is perfectly good for consumption, and we give it a new life. And so by recuperating the food, and we recuperate souls at the same time. And the people we serve every night with the food that we transformed and upcycled would be the non-poetic way of saying it, but for us is we give it a new life. And so we create it into beautiful meals every night that's being served to those that don't have, so people living in the streets. And so it's this moment of shifting roles, but the celebration is the same. So people come in feeling really inhuman. So that's when I connected yesterday, when I shared at the beginning of the session about food and dignity, food and identity. So people come in because they weren't being seen in the streets. They are invisible. We don't pay attention, we're scared, we're prejudiced. So we created this safe space within our school, where people then come in and they look down, they feel inhuman, and by sitting down at the table, having a crystal glass in front of them, cutlery, and being served, they start recuperating humanity. They start socializing with one another, and we serve a meal. These are all volunteers serving every night. Lucien has served with us in Rio last year as well. And we basically just create this moment of interaction, human interaction, looking into each other's eyes, I serving something that's a human need. But it goes way beyond that, because when people become human over this meal, and the way that it's served, we take time to explain the menu. We give, every time the chefs come out that cooked that meal and they get applauded for, they share where this recipe originated from, because there's a lot of guest chefs that come from around the world, and so they share their cultural identity behind it. So the Mexican chef shared about mole, and everyone was just silently listening. So it's like this whole communion around food. So we really take time from the process of producing, recuperating, up until presenting what's going to be shared, sharing together the service moment, and then afterward, there's always applause, there's always sharing stories. And I think this is just such a beautiful moment. So when I share by the end of the week that video, you're going to see it, and you're going to see it in the face of the people. So those that came in feeling inhuman, they within just an hour recuperate humanity, hope, and many of them then go changing their lives, looking for different paths. Or some of them just had this one beautiful moment of celebration every day. And they might not change their path, but they started feeling human. So it's really just like in the physical appearance of people as well. For the celebration moment, they lift up, they look each other in the eye. So yeah, I think this is for me the food celebration moment, where I see in the world, people not taking time to share meals anymore. This is the most important thing to value, to respect, and to share, and to celebrate. And I think we too often forget to celebrate our meals.
I love you so much, Nicky. Thank you. It's such an inspiring movement that really started. It's kind of from grassroots to planetary. So the social gastronomy movement is such an incredible organization for us to shine a light on with this process. And just before I move on to the next step, I just wanted to share. This, as you were speaking, Nicky, I've grown up. My childhood home, spiritual home, as I call it, still today, is in India. It's the world's largest leprosarium in India. It's a huge community of disabled people, and it's enormous amount of agricultural land. And so my father taught me farming practices and water cultivation practices, etc., since I was 9 years old. And one thing there that, like, all of the food, everything you eat was grown there. It's cooked in kitchens together. And then we all, as a giant community, like leprosy patients, etc., we all eat together every day. It's 3 meals a day together. And that connection, that dignity there is like nowhere I've ever seen. I feel so lucky that I kind of have a frame of reference that's different to most people. You know, the reality is most people just haven't had those experiences in life, and therefore they've kind of forgotten the relationship with food, you know, they because they just haven't directly been experienced to it. So this food reverence, things like mindful meals, and like, how do we think as we go into the next stage of like, how do we take this moment in history and all the different community movements that we see working, how do we synthesize them into something that we could put more funding and more resources into? And so that's the whole goal of the Unified Planet, is like scaling community solutions for the planetary commons, like getting these systemic solutions out as far as and wide as possible. So just moving into the next stage, we just to recap on the kind of the different stream areas, what we're looking for is eight solutions that we can kind of shine a light on. I think one really good example of a solution that came up today is mindful meals. You know, another solution is the social gastronomy movement can have a light shined on it. You know, with Mackenzie, we spoke about the geospatial technologies. We can highlight that as a solution, and so that we've got this kind of first stage, the seed stage. But I just shared the Google Docs from the discussions the last 2 days. And what we synthesized was 8 topics: food justice, food genome, food education, food reverence, food waste, food technology, food and land stewardship, and then community regenerative development. So these are the kind of thematic areas that we're looking to bring highlighted solutions, because the idea is that the solutions are as diverse as possible. So what we'd love to do now is maybe go around, we last time we separated into much smaller groups. Let's just try staying together as a bigger group for a little bit, and maybe just go around, and if there's suggestions you have around known community solutions that you think could be kind of brought together into this synthesis paper for each one of those sections, maybe share that, and otherwise you can also write them in there as well while others are talking. How does that sound? Cool. Does that, anyone want to share, for example, on food justice, anything that we know about, a solution that we know about food justice that could be profiled?
Well, I think it's really pertinent right now and always to think about distribution and how that's serving us, especially right now as our supply chains are shifting rather quickly, and you know, who gets access to what kind of food, and this is going to continue to be a longer term issue as climate affects different parts of the world, and we won't have the same kinds of dependable supply chains from certain places, or there's weather-related events happening. So I just want to call out how important distribution is. And if there, I know there's some organizations looking right now, especially how to get food that's locally grown and fresh, especially to communities that are being affected by COVID and need groceries, and so, or even the rise of the community garden, the home garden movement right now is pretty incredible, tapping into that and supporting people to grow their own. That touches upon food justice and, access, but in different ways.
So thank you so much for that, Christa. What I'm kind of hearing, and I'm always trying to listen to, like, how do we put this together into something that could be a kind of pillar of this document. So the food distribution, if we could think about a community solution that would bring food distribution into the commons, and that people could join these trusted networks, which would be like a kind of circular economy, and like create food security from local regenerative farms. This has been something that Nadim at the Mushroom Farm and we have been talking about, is like, how can the Mushroom Farm and Savannah House create kind of like a prototype network around food security and food distribution, like literally farm straight to where you could have a community distribution hub, etc. So like CSA boxes, but kind of within networks. So this could be a really good example, and would love you if you check out the notes there, would love you to contribute any kind of suggestions of what that could look like if it was a food distribution commons. And if anyone else has suggestions as well.
Yeah, I have a suggestion. For me, food justice is very much related also to food education in a way, right? Because to have access to healthy food, it's not only that I have it accessible in my area, it's also about how to prepare it. And that's what we're doing in Medellin with Platos Sin Fronteras, Plates Without Borders, where we try to bring them right now during Corona, but I think it will continue. We're bringing them fresh food from local farmers, the best food, best high quality food with recipes. We give them access to really great chefs who have all that know-how about, for example, microbiotics, like all that know-how they don't have access to. So I really like, when we talk about justice, I think we should also talk about education and have access to knowledge the most vulnerable don't have access to. Yeah, so that's a point I would really love to underline there.
Thank you, Paola. So just as you were speaking, I was connecting mindful meals with this distribution model, where we would turn the receiving food into a ritual through, like, you could put a cultural layer in there as well, if you see what I mean, with this model of the rituals that you're inviting people to. So lots to think about there. Anyone else like to share on this before we move?
I just want to lend in, that even taps into like the joy of food that was discussed, and the connection with food. And so because talking about access, or you don't have the knowledge, it's making it fun. Food is joy, it's pleasure. So bringing in that knowledge and the cooking and opportunities through making it fun and enjoyable really resonates too.
Yeah.
Thanks for that point, Paola.
I think there's a lot of people wanting to comment, but go, Tim.
I was just going to say, adding to that, I was literally giving my girlfriend access. I'm making her miso soup at the moment. But education is a huge part of it. And the other thing that feels really important for me is inspiration. And it's highlighting leaders that are out there, giving, first of all, supporting them and the good work that they're doing, but using them as examples and inspiration for others and for younger generations, because they become those that we emulate. So it's really about creating the food heroes out there.
Yeah.
And for me, that's such an important part of it, because it creates a catalyzation of the movement, of the decision making, of the purchasing, and all of that.
I have to build on that point. Actually, it goes really nicely with what I was going to say. You talked about inspiration. I was going to talk about aspiration.
Yeah.
So the aspiration part in that sense, like what we see with the communities we work with through Gastromotiva, that there is a deserving element, like it's psychological, of where over the last years, like what became aspirational because people couldn't afford it was Coca-Cola. So actually the first thing that people do is purchase their Coke. So how do you make organic aspirational? Because people, so it links a little bit to what everyone said before, what Christa said or Paola, there's a knowledge gap and an aspiration gap, because they started, our communities where they look for, yes, everyone used to have Coca-Cola. Now we have money to get, to have more access to Coca-Cola. But how do you make the other thing aspirational of maybe organics or more diverse plates? I'm not saying, because health is comes in different forms, but I think so the aspiration, the psychological piece of people and feeling that they deserve something and that they want it, I think becomes really important. So the celebration around it is important, of making it joyful, like Christa said. Just to add on that, and then I wanted to bring another piece to food justice, because I think there's the access, there's the education, the inspiration and aspiration, but also the living wages around jobs in the food system. So it comes from being an agricultural food hero up until becoming, like recently what we saw as well is, chefs becoming superstars. So how do we make farmers the new superstars as well, instead of just, chefs? So it goes, we have an opportunity to shed light, make it inspirational, and as well, even having access, like in what Gastromotiva has been working for many years, is creating job opportunities for those on the margins, because we didn't have this opportunity to get the education in the gastronomy world, because it became extremely, extremely expensive in Latin America to study gastronomy, because it became, so popular to be a chef where everyone wanted, and so obviously, they increased the prices, so people from the poor communities couldn't even study to become a cook. And so what we did is free education to become a cook and be included in the job sector of the hospitality industry. So I think there's this part as well of living wage jobs within, food justice. Access to jobs, and then having even, the right wage within it, because nowadays it's really hard, like a lot of farmers don't even have the money to survive and buy their own food because they don't make it.
So what I'm seeing here, Nicky, is like if you imagine that going into the future, the Planet Food Alliance, and to be a member of that alliance, which is a planetary alliance, to be a member, that you need to make certain commitments. You need to actually make an oath. And that oath would include things like, at a planetary scale, no one working in the food systems has anything less than living wages. But that's the kind of thing that this will evolve into. And there's plenty of those kind of pledges. The question for us is like, how do we layer so many of them together to be part of this ecosystem, so that it becomes a thing in its own, each one becomes more than the sum of its parts. The thing that kept coming to my mind was, we talk a lot about this, given this is a game, kind of a la Bucky Fuller. Bread and games, the Romans talked about bread and games. And one of the reasons we started with food is we felt that there was a kind of jiu-jitsu move on capitalism, and the whole market economy starts with food. And so part of what we've been thinking about is, how do we design ways for people playing the game to be part of this like new design model for a distribution, like food distribution, members club kind of thing, from local regenerative farms. And so we've been thinking about how could we find the organizations to partner, such as Mushroom Farm and others, to test this in a really small scale. So
Yeah,
Cara?
I'd love to in there, and that's what I was gonna kind of add is around prototype on a small scale, and actually this this exact model is something I've been working on for a while here in Alegria, and so, like I love the idea of having community supported farms or community gardens in urban areas as a for distribution employment in Los
You're
Angeles. The farm.
you're breaking up a little too much to hear
Um,
properly. We're only getting every other word.
oh no. Let me turn my video off. Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So I was sharing the prototype that I've been working on for a while at Alegria Village, and also in Los Angeles, when I was living in Los Angeles, using community farms in urban areas, community gardens, and community supported farms as hubs for distribution to sort of test this model, like on a small scale, like you said. Actually, here in Costa Rica, just this morning, actually was up in the farm harvesting. We have a handful of families that we're supporting during COVID with fresh boxes of produce from our farms. We harvested bags filled with produce, bought additional staples. Ideally everything would be grown locally, but in the meantime, beans, rice, sugar, oils, filling these boxes. We call them cajas de alegría, boxes of joy. Christina, you mentioned food is all about joy, and I totally second that. And so then we drove around this morning and delivered them. And as we're interacting with the local families, giving them a huge box of produce from the farm, we're also telling them about the ingredients. And I have a WhatsApp group. And so actually right now my WhatsApp group is blowing up with the 12 families we delivered to this morning asking, like, how do I use this? How do I cook this? And our long-term vision is to then, as we're developing one-on-one relationships with each of these neighbors that are in our local community. For those of you who don't know, Alegria is a village. So we have a farm that's supported by our community here, and also a one-on-one CSA model. So we're selling CSA boxes of produce, and that goes to getting these boxes in our local community. And then the long-term vision is to actually be able to bring them produce from our farm and starts and seeds and then actually help them set up their own backyard once they've already, like, you can't just jump that, because the thing is that families that have never had access to fresh organic produce, they don't know anything about that. So the process first, bringing this into their home, teaching them how to cook with these plants that they've never seen before in life. Next step is bring them onto our farm to actually have harvest and have a meal on our land in the farm so they can. And then the next step is having volunteers from our community steward their gardens until it's completely transparent so that they own and operate those.
Cara, this is amazing. It's like peering into the future of the crest of a wave. What I would love to invite you, Cara, is if there's a way you could summarize like that as a working model, like just how it works. That's a perfect example of an upload where we go and say, look, let's scale this as a fractal so that communities all around the world can adopt this same model. And like, this is what you need to partner with the, farms in the local area. And we kind of define the model. That sounds to me so very scalable.
I actually am working on because I have a network of community and involved in the gardens for a long time, and I want to be able to replicate this from in cities. Right, you just need a garden that can be the hub that can, especially if
Cara, we're afraid we can't get you. We're getting every other word again. I'm sorry, but
okay, no worries.
But
I'm working. Yes.
I think this is 100% like, and you're already seeing how food education as a track and food justice, it's obvious how we're all part of a connected ecosystem with these. So would love just to invite us to go on to similar conversation, and we'll see how all these things connect on food genome. You know, is that the right name for it? Is it a track in its own right? And this is where, in particular, this might be your piece, Cara, as well, with what you've been doing with Stephen, but others are doing it. Food, soil, and seed banks. I'm thinking about this from the kind of the science of the science of our understanding of seeds and food. It obviously connects to education, but anything people know about that should go in here?
It's really Stephen who brought that up.
It was Stephen Brooks that brought this up yesterday, so we might kind of wait till he joins us tomorrow, unless anyone has points.
Is it something I could comment? What was
Yeah, for sure. It was this was a category, and like question, is this a category? We felt it was when we were trying to listen to what everyone was raising, but basically like it started with seed banks and the intelligence of like
the living library.
Yeah, this is all around the living library, around like how do we connect. It felt like this was very like a very important thing to include. I think you might be Cara. I might move on because your signal's not working. Does anyone else want to share anything on this?
Unless you'd like me.
We're just struggling to hear you, Cara. I'm sorry, it's getting kind of every other word. Anyone else got anything they'd like to share on this particular one?
I have a question, Lucia, on the process. What you'd like to hear are concrete examples that could be taken forward, right?
Yeah, basically what happens is on Friday we created the draft of it's called the upgrade, which is kind of like the 8 most pertinent systems change areas for food. And so what we're trying to do is not have like 8 of the same solutions in the same category. What we're trying to do is say, if these things got funded, like we would make very rapid change. And then what happens is we stack every 2 weeks more, and we take them through this 8-week process, so that by the end of the 8 weeks, there's actually like money being asked for, like we need this much money to do this thing. And then, you know, every 2 weeks, new things are coming in. The idea is it's a lot easier to raise like hundreds of millions of dollars to fund a movement than it is to raise like, you know, tens of thousands of dollars for each project. And so we're trying to create a new way. So what we're looking for here is like, what are the key things that we need to like include when it comes to food systems change? And then what are like community solutions that we already know about that we can profile that could be recipients of funding?
Yeah, if I could add on to the seed banks, just to include heritage heirloom animal species categories. So I know down here in Texas it's so hot that we had a handful of regenerative farmers grab a handful of pigs and cows and sheep and try to do the rotational grazing, and they just all die of heat stroke. And so until they were able to get a functional heritage smart breed of animals that can survive in the pasture and handle the heat, their whole system couldn't work. So just to include some way to connect farmers in local bioregions with specific climate considerations and heritage breeds together, so that if I'm in a 100-degree dry climate, I know what types of species and breeds I should be looking for.
It's almost like adaptive farming, given the reality of climate change. How do we create a support system that can share that kind of knowledge, is what you're saying. Heritage breeds, yeah. Interesting.
And Adam, that's another perfect question that tees up the geospatial conversation we had yesterday.
Yeah. Which we are going to continue, and I'm excited about that. I've reached out to Will Marshall. We're speaking at some point, and Neil tomorrow. So it's going. That's great. Okay. I will let's move on because we
On that point, there are two community members from the social gastronomy movement that are working with soil regeneration, so really from the desert and turning them into fertile soils. One in Portugal, like recuperating whole parts that have not been fertile, and one in the Amazonas, Eugenio, that you've met. He's working with all of these different elements, and they've already succeeded in taking parts of that soil that wasn't producing anything anymore and turned it into very fertile soil, and they can plant and produce, and so so these are two examples that I could bring forward in the future.
I love it. Adreni, who from the Amazon.
Eugenio. Eugene, I guess, would be the English.
That's right. I remember. I love him. This is a great. If he could, let's invite him tomorrow just to see if he could bring, bring this project, because desertification. This is my father, like, obsessed with this. Like, took me down a lot of rabbit holes on this one. But that same place I described, Ananvan it's called, is like a land regeneration like superstar. Like, we have 200,000 visitors a year, etc. And a big part of it was that the land was it was an old quarry, completely like derelict land. And it's been turned into this agricultural, like, famous story because it's got 4 times the yield of any of the local land. It's got permaculture, etc. And it's like, that was such a lesson to me in this. So, and it's kind of a tale of our times as well when we tell those stories. It's like what Tim was saying earlier about and Nicky about celebrity chefs, etc. And like the superheroes. This could be a piece that we bring into the into like a card game and delivery system. So. And education here. So let's move on to the next one, which is food education. So this, like, is, Stephen mentioned Ecoversity. There's different programs we know about. What would we say, just like, what do you think would be best to profile as like a community solution in education, something that could be really scaled? And this might be where social gastronomy movement fits in. Nicky?
I feel like I'm talking a lot. I'm so sorry.
Or Nicky or Paola, I feel like food education, what does anyone else, I know the social gastronomy movement and what they're doing around this, and feel that that's something that could be dramatically scaled. You know, we've been to breakfasts in Davos about this very topic. So that would be kind of, I think, the best thing to profile given what I've seen. But if anyone else has like other references of other projects that you'd recommend gets profiled around food education, that's the kind of thing we're trying to do, is like capture as much as possible around each topic.
Well, we can definitely link in social gastronomy movement, because these are projects around the world, organizations that are working on different levels. Like Paola with Platos Sin Fronteras is really focusing on the nutrition piece. And then there's, for example, in Minnesota, recipe for changes in Miami. But like, there are different projects that take different angles of it. So there's a collective knowledge in our network very much around education. It goes from farming, urban farming, and these choices that we spoke about for underprivileged communities, to education towards inclusion within the hospitality industry, like Gastromotiva. So I think there's a lot of collective knowledge where we could tap into, and concrete examples on the grounds. I don't know, Paola, if you have something to add as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we are focused on nutrition education mainly. So it's about like giving access to the most vulnerable, access to nutrition knowledge. And through this access, we connect different let's say, we call it estratos, like different income levels. So we bring people from, you know, higher income levels to the communities. And I agree with Nicky. I think there are a lot of projects around this. I mean, even Cara, I think, was it, who just talked about how they're bringing fresh food and those packages, the Alegría, to the communities. So it's all around education. So I really agree that we could like tap into this collective knowledge of projects which are working on it and see how we can either, and bring that together to a project. That could be interesting, I think. If we afterwards think about getting funding or getting support on this, and grab like the best pieces out of those different projects around nutrition education or food education. Yeah.
And one of the things that we're trying to do through the social gastronomy movement is to scale best practices. So taking not just one model that works in one area or one city, one country, but combining the learnings of the different elements. So around the different topics of it. And so how do we learn from each of these organizations and bring out like a global curriculum, for example? Yeah, that was something that one of our arms of work that we want to develop. So that's definitely, because the organizations are already connected and so open to collaborate towards open innovation.
Well, this has never been so easy. I think I think what we'll do is have the upload profile that networked approach to food education. And that can kick us off into like how would we best profile the work of social gastronomy movement to funders, which is conversations we've already been having. So Nicky, if you and Paola could be the kind of, we call them Sherpas, but of a particular area, just so that we can make sure that we do justice to the pillar, and make sure that kind of that there's something tangible to move into the next step. Christa, I think you wanted to say something, right?
Yeah, I would like to make a note. You know, it's so interesting. I have heard about the gastronomy movement in Brazil as well. I know somebody who's working on kind of mapping out that system there and network there. It's super exciting, and I love more of the focus around culture and uplifting that, and even bringing in then, you know, I would say, instead of talking about it as education, it's you know, cultural awareness and excitement, and bringing in sort of people who are idols or models for change. And a lot of the work, and I know it's different in different places, but working on nutrition in communities in the US was very much a shift away from just education, because we found we've been doing education for a long time and it wasn't making a difference. And we still had these major issues with obesity and overweight, and people were eating, but and we were educating them to eat better, but they just didn't have access to good food. So it was, you know, a combination of changing your environment with some environment education. The education alone isn't enough. And what I see really now is there's a need for culture shift. And, you know, we eat what our friends are eating, what our family's eating, and you know, who we look up to and what we see on media. And so really thinking about it from a gastronomical, cultural perspective, I think is really beautiful.
I love that. I wrote, rather than food education, we could potentially call it food enchantment. You know, the full, just to put that out there, but you know, it's the full stack, from learning to being inspired to being aspirational to, like, it's the full. So that's.
But I think that, and we can agree on that later, but I think that that's the problem in our education system, right? When we talk about education for all, it's that we don't have enough inspiring tools and enchanting tools in our education system. So I know that education sometimes sounds very rigid because our system is rigid, but normally education should be fun, it should be enchanting, it should be motivating, inspiring. So I really think it's about knowledge transfer, and knowledge transfer is education in a way, right? So I agree. Like maybe enchantment, yes, it sounds really great, but I don't think it really brings. Or maybe yes, maybe it is a nice word or a nice umbrella, but I just think that education, it's more about the system, but the word itself is important.
Yeah, and I would say also experience, it's, what is really powerful is having hands-on experiences with growing food, with cooking food, and so that the education is actually how it's delivered too, is that it's more experiential as opposed to having a teacher, giving me a handout, and that level, that kind of education, how it's delivered matters so much. Who buy and so on.
Well,
Yeah,
go ahead, Adam.
One of the best organizations that I found on how to deliver and make great mentors is the Wilderness Awareness School. And they have a great text called The Coyote's Guide to Mentoring, which is all based off of native ancient ways of how did the elders mentor the youth and allow for self-guided discoveries and move away from education and move towards self-discovery. And so I've used their methods on every curriculum from medicine with soldiers to 5-year-olds in the forest. And they're just an amazing foundation of like, how do you convey information?
Imagine if you could create a game where the only way for you to get your next delivery of food would be for you to pass the test, which would be part of like taking you through, for example, the Coyote's Guide to Mentoring. And so we would actually create a game that would include like enchantment of food. I'm just sort of seeing the ways all these things are connecting that could be really cool.
For the wording part, I think what Christa brought, the cultural piece, includes like all of this in a way, almost. Because it's like food and my self-help when it comes to the culture that includes from education to mentorship. Like, I don't know, like I feel the food culture could be a good word for it.
Food culture is the kind of umbrella title more so than enchantment. I know
I would see it more food culture than enchantment.
Yeah, okay.
Enchantment is a piece of it. My personal opinion.
Well, if Nicky, if you and Paola would be able to, like, we'll work with you to try and synthesize this into a one-page of, like, this is what food culture can encompass, and this is the role that social gastronomy movement can play in bringing together all of these different aspects of food culture, nutrition to awareness to inspiration to creating heroes out of chefs and farmers, etc. So we will. That would be awesome if you could. Maybe we'll create a Google Doc specific to this, but or a section on the Google Doc. So, and that actually leads us into the next one, which is food reverence. Now, Sycamore is going to lead this, so we might just move on quickly from here onto food waste or food technology. Just we've got 20 minutes left. But food reverence, I feel like we should take a pause and go around. I know Sycamore's going to be back tomorrow, and he'll be leading on this piece. But anything you'd like to share on the food reverence as that could be scaled, profiled and scaled in this area? My thinking was this would be mindful meals. Christa?
Yeah, I feel like that's a great direction, or it's a great tool for this one in terms of a ritual and reverence. I'm trying to think what else we could tap into.
What do you think, Christa, about the idea of creating like a deck of cards that would go with mindful meals, that would introduce, like, take people on a kind of, 21 questions to fall in love with food kind of thing?
I love that idea, like the prompt questions.
Yeah,
and that could be easily, Yeah, that can be easy and distributed. You can even have small groups and they pick what questions they want to do or use. I feel like I've seen something almost like that
Yeah.
before, but
And I was thinking here, then there's other things we know about. There's I'm part of this community with the World Economic Forum. They're called the Young Global Leaders that Nicky knows well, and they've got a program called Table for Two, which is this model where when you purchase a meal, you're buying one for someone else as well. It's the Tom Shoes of meals, and that could be a distribution model for these cards, for example. So there's like ways we could bring rituals of like table for two experiences in to companies, etc. With this food reverence, with mindful meals. So feels like there's a lot there. Christa, would you be able? Do you know Sycamore?
no, I don't think so.
You're gonna really enjoy each other. He'll be back tomorrow, but this one would be awesome to get an understanding of if we were to kind of bring mindful meals into the planetary commons as something that we're inviting and talking about in podcasts and like just inviting more people to spread. How would we communicate what that practice is? So just like it's just a one pager, or even shorter than a one pager. I can send you how we structure it. But that would be a really cool thing to put into sound reverence as like a solution.
Cool. Yeah, I look forward to meeting Sycamore and happy to help contribute something to that too.
Awesome. Thank you. Moving on. So next was food waste. This was what I was reflecting this morning, and we discussed it, and I was like, it needs to be here as an issue because it's such a. I've got a number of friends that are kind of deep in this issue, and so do we all agree this needs to be one of the 8 categories that's in that? Is there a particular solution area that you'd like to raise?
I think some of it will be covered within food culture because it's a consciousness of, if you value the food you eat, you wouldn't waste it. But other things could be maybe around technology, because redistribution. So like there's Too Good To Go, there's, there's a few of these innovations where technology breaks these logistical layers of it. So there's, the education piece of our consciousness around food, and then there's the logistics distribution piece that I think would be interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely Tristram.
Oh, you're watching that? Yeah, I think that the bringing in distribution and logistics in here, and maybe like highlighting, it's going to relate to all the others, which is a good thing. So
yeah, you could go at this at a couple different angles. You could do the more systems level logistics distribution, or the personal responsibility, or awareness in the individual action that could be taken to reduce food waste. So it's like systems level with distribution, and or aspects of culture, even reverence, because once you really appreciate everything that goes into the food and growing it, the amount of energy, the amount of water, you don't want to be wasteful with it. I took a group of chefs to farm for a day, and they said one of the biggest learnings that they had was like, oh my gosh, this is so much work, so much goes into it. I have so much more care about, reducing the food waste in my kitchens and using all parts of the plant. And so that connects to, the hands-on experience and education. It's kind of could be all connected, especially with the individual kind of cultural approach and education.
Yeah. Well, I think I completely agree, Christa, and I think this is going to be what we'll see once we've created these 8 areas. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to bring them into what fits into the alliance, and then what needs its own guilds for anything that wants to continue, there's no pressure, but like that's the intention is that we're all stronger together as these go through. So I think we'll see where these naturally come back together, and part of the goal right now is kind of
Something else we think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to note something else we talk a lot about and think a lot about is, you know, the notion of something not being perfect or imperfectly delicious produce is the program we call, and that could be done, you know, that's at a institutional level as well as a, you know, personal individual level of appreciation of something that doesn't look perfect per se, and still, you know, using it, consuming it, making sure that's a part of what we are consuming. So just wanted to add that element, as important it is, because we're still not there institutionally and distribution wise. There's a lot of farms that are throwing away items that don't fit a certain size because they can't be, you know, cut a certain way to go through the processing facilities, or they don't, you know, they're not being accepted by the buyers and so on. So there's still a lot of work to do on that level as well.
And Lucian, you know, if you think about it, at the core of soil and the value chains around soil, that's really the conversation we're having with food waste and organic waste. You know, in a larger context, food waste and organic waste are soil, are the water cycle, are climate change, and you know, it's something that GeoGrow, our growing system, because we're self-contained and soil-based. You know, we're one of the only scalable soil-based growing systems in the world. And, you know, of course, composting and bioenergy, a big piece of how we do what we do. And, you know, Bucky Fuller's whole, position about, you know, waste simply being unrealized resources is so true today. And, you know, I've heard institutional investors who make, infrastructure investments talk about landfills as savings accounts. And, you know, they take the movie WALL-E very seriously. And, you know, look at a tremendous amount of unrealized resources, you know, creating methane in landfills. So just definitely, if you're going to talk about food waste, pull it back to soil.
You know, an invitation, Mackenzie. Thank you so much for that. We have this kind of role of being a steward of one of these, each of these, they're called uploads, and I get a sense here that what would be really useful is if you could be the steward for both food waste and food technology, because I think there's going to be sufficient synthesis if then the goal is to highlight highlight your projects, highlight like solutions that you're seeing, and like bring in the space for partners like Planet Labs and Versus and others, you know, Planet Home, etc., into that initiative.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, awesome. So that's cool. Well, that brings us then on to now, Mackenzie, where food technology. So we've spoken about geoponics, geospatial. This is such a giant category where there's so many different solutions. Like what we're really looking for this week is like, what's like one fundable community solution that could actually be developed into the commons? So in the case of sound, I mentioned earlier that we've got a company that's currently being spun out and like supported through this process called Sound Helix, which is going to produce crystal bowls and a robotic arm that plays itself. And their goal is to create like the Tom Shoes of sound, where every bowl that's purchased by a consumer, another bowl goes into a school or a hospital and that kind of thing. And so we're 2 weeks in and it's moving, you know? And
I want one.
Yeah, who doesn't want a bowl? Who doesn't want to wake up in the morning to a crystal bowl that is your alarm clock? You know, it's
Please.
Like, that's a legit company. So
when the baby's crying, I'm going to walk her over to that thing. But I'm sorry, keep going.
Exactly. They're like crystal babysitters. So, and that's just like one of the things that came out. So the intention here, like, let's think about something that you can kind of take the reins with, Mackenzie, here. And I would say specifically, like, what is that collaboration between Neil, like Will Marshall, like, let's think about that for this section, and feel free if anyone else wants to add anything, or like if it's not clear. But do you want to just lead us through where you're at, Mackenzie, on this?
Certainly, as concisely as I can. Greg Wendt and I have done a lot of work around this with Neil Sahota in that equation. And, you know, there's a couple other people I mentioned yesterday that already have some tools that are being developed in this space. I think when it comes down to it, these are really complicated conversations, and anybody on this call would confirm that. You know, Josiah is a perfect example of somebody who's worked his whole career in really complicated conversations, you know, around community development and infrastructure and ecology, and, you know, when you bring geospatial tools and data tools and artificial intelligence analysis to, you know, a conversation around agriculture, or a conversation around a food system, or, you know, the regenerative ecology, economy, and community development, you know, it's so much easier and better for people to see it than to read about it in a report, or to get yet another 12 slides from an entrepreneur talking about their solution to, you know, one slice of the pizza, so to speak. And, you know, because there's so many perspectives on the same pizza at so many layers, and it all comes down to who's going to pay to build the system, and how the system is going to be self-supporting, much less sustainable, much less regenerative. You know, I feel like the conversation has really evolved to, how do we make this visual and tangible with real data and real-time visibility and transparency into what's actually happening. And so, you know, that's where our conversations have come back to Versus, have come back to planet.com, have included multimodal data from stuff like drones and smart glasses and that kind of thing. Because we're trying to take what's available and build it into the most accessible data set for everybody. Something you don't have to bring any knowledge or vernacular or experience or education to. And from a design perspective, if we can change the concept of finance for all of these projects from, hey, we've got a farm field, what do you think we should grow? Because, hey, last year at the market, so-and-so did really well with this. Do you think we should grow some of that? You think people will buy it? You know, taking the risk out of that, you know, field to farmer's market equation, or field to CSA, or even field to commercial buyer equation, and rather starting with, what do you want to grow because this person's going to buy it and they're going to pay you that much for it? And based on, you know, the desire to grow that plant to those specifications, what's the best system in the world for accomplishing that? And
boom.
You know, we can.
And that idea of creating smart contracts where people that are playing the game could go and say, I want to use this many stars, which is the currency inside the game, to buy this much food that will get delivered to my house or my community center. And that way people could actually like have smart contracts with local regenerative farms where people know what they're going to get paid for what, and they can see demand directly. Like that kind of thing is totally like the future of a planetary food system in the commons.
You're 100% right. I mean, particularly for specialty crops, but everything from cannabis to marigolds to chamomile to roses to asparagus, you know, nuts and cherries. Somebody said something about Michigan earlier, you know, for specialty crops. Farmers do not grow specialty crops because there is no specialty crop insurance. And finance was never designed, agricultural finance was never designed to support specialty crop production. So farmers got pushed into commodity crop production, or whatever they're passionate about, basically. And from a commercial perspective, it just doesn't work. The market's not built for it. Grocery stores don't have back rooms anymore. So the just-in-time shipping nature of it requires people not only to have production, but logistics in order to make it work. And all of that starts with finance. Because without finance, you're not doing compliance, you're not doing regulatory, you're not GMP certified, you don't have cold trucks, you don't have storage, and you can't put something pretty enough on the shelf in the store. And, you know, plain and simple, the market these days has to start with demand secured, which is why solar did it, which is why if you want to build a solar farm, you sign a power purchase agreement. The two biggest investors in local agriculture are Kimball Musk and Jeff Bezos. They've put over $1 billion in fresh produce purchase agreements into secured demand financing to build their own 100,000 square foot vertical plant factories in every major American city. The challenge is they're growing with, you know, aeroponic plants with synthetic nutrients in robotic plant factories where they've completely removed people from the equation. And I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot to me like raising my kids on Mountain Dew, pizza, and video games. So like in general, I feel like the plants deserve us building systems to give them what they want. And I don't care if it's my system or hydroponics or aeroponics or aquaponics or agroforestry or, open field farming. I'm for all of it. But at the core of whatever we do, the most important thing in the world is soil. And, if we can have that conversation today about any of this, and we can talk about food technology and how to curate the soil into the biome into nutrition into healthy people, evidence-based medicine through biometrics, IoT integration, that's the conversation we're having. So I know that's a lot of blah, blah, but, please help. I'm just trying to paint the picture here. And if you guys can be helpful to this, this has been 3 years, Greg and James Sanusa and Maria Dayton and, the Regen Network guys, we've kicked this around, Nutrient Food Association, the Center for Mindful Agriculture, Biodynamics Association, and Demeter. They've all been playing with us on this. We'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas.
Well, just for one, this is the perfect example of something that you can synthesize and then we can bring forward into a guild that is all about what aspects of this can be brought and scaled into the commons. So I think, and something that we could approach Kimball Musk with as well. I mean, he's in very much kind of in and around this community of ours. So amazing that love James, love Greg, love that you're doing this. Anyone else want to throw in any responses there, offer any responses, thoughts? We're gonna do the final.
I'd like to say I really appreciate those comments on, what is actually, some of the impediments and barriers to systems change. And I've also noted and said, the insurance issue is a huge piece of why more people don't grow fruits and vegetables and basic food that we want to eat, because the risk is so enormous for them. And so who shares that risk and how are they supported and what kind of values are supported, and I think another huge issue is that we don't have a lot of value to those who are land stewards and steward ecology, and that's not built into our system. So those who are caring for the land and creating more regenerative future and healthy soils, they're not paid for those services. They're not paid for their services of supporting quality water. So to me, it's a lot about a value system shift that's needed overall as well, in order to support a more socially and environmentally just food system for the future. And it's how do we shift our economy to be a shared benefit system? So it gets bigger and bigger as far as what's needed, as opposed to, I know we're trying to get into some narrow solutions here, but I just want to echo those issues within everything we're talking about. So thanks.
Thank you for that, Christa. And we want to be respectful of your time. We're at the 12:30 mark, so we're going to meet again tomorrow at 11. And we've already got Shane here, who is the mastermind behind the self-playing bowls we mentioned. So we're going to move into that now. And we will synthesize. There's been lots of notes taken. Just some follow-ups. Food justice, that will be sherped by Cara. And we're going to do a model of like, how do we scale what's happening in Alegria? Food genome. Adam, like we could look at Adam and Stephen maybe. Thinking about heritage, heirloom, cattle like that, but what we synthesize there, cattle species, farmers with climate considerations, things like adaptive farming. Food culture, Nicky and Paola, looking like how we profile the social gastronomy movement and like the networked approach that could provide solutions there. Food reverence, Christa and mindful meals. We're going to pull that out and like look at what we can synthesize there. Food waste and food technology, Mackenzie. We're going to try and summarize that piece of work so that we can get to a point to build on top of it, and just like be your partner, be a kind of like accelerator partner for you. And then we've got food and land stewardship,
That
which
could be Adam,
which
if you want.
yeah, Adam would be awesome on that one. And then we've got community regenerative development, which could be, Josiah and Sycamore. Yeah. Adam, how does that sound for food and land stewardship?
That sounds great.
Awesome. This has been great day of synthesis here. So thank you all so much. And we'll see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Oh, special day tomorrow, actually. I forgot to say this. So tomorrow, a number of friends of mine are involved in creating this planetary synchronized meditation at 11 a.m. And so people all over the world, something like 1 million people, are all going to be meditating together at 11 a.m. So request is, would love you to arrive like on the dot sharp at 11 a.m. tomorrow if you can. We will be part of, we'll have our own piece as part of, we'll kick us off for this like planetary scale meditation, which feels really appropriate for our last day of the seed stage of the game. So I'll send the link around by email so you see what it's about. But we'll go through that and then we'll go into the hour together. So
thank you all.
Thank you all so much.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate you all. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for the conversation. Look forward to more.
You've come in hot with this. Thank you so much for all your contributions. Cool. Hey, Shane.
Hey guys, good morning.